I talk about shit that's important to me, and sometimes we have guests. Today we have. How did you pronounce your name again?
Hrafn.
Hrafn. This Hrafn is a associate of mine that I met through Twitter, and the two of us have been having a lot of extensive discussion over the current subject matter. So I figured it prudent to invite them onto the podcast so that we could have a accessible, open, and coherent discussion on Mallory Jessica and Sarah Zedig and the overall conversation of shoplifting, the morality of shoplifting, and whether or not this is a discourse that we should be having a long-term conversation of rather than just a long-term drama. So, you made a very good point during our discussion on Twitter yesterday, and I was wondering if maybe you could explain it to the listeners, your perspective on this whole situation.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't really. I'm really unfamiliar with the comic artist or most of the drama around it. I try to keep myself as far away from the discourse with a capital T and capital D as possible, just for the sake of my own sanity. And I've got enough stuff going on at the moment. But I saw a number of people who I follow on Twitter and generally look up to or value their insights and input, including you, commenting about this comic that wherein one of the characters engages in some shoplifting of art supplies, I believe. And was titled yeah, and I believe the title was, what was it? Was it Be Gay Do Crime?
It was Be Crime Do Gay.
Okay, yeah. I'm currently wearing my Be Gay Do Crime t-shirt, but and there's a lot of stuff going on with this, apparently. Like I said, I'm not really keyed into a lot of the details of the discourse. I know there's a lot of harassment going on, which is bad, but also a lot of people ostensibly defending the artist from said harassment, doing so by defending a particular kind of approach to or understanding of shoplifting as sort of a political act. And I think there are some issues with that.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of Mallory's defenders, or Jessica, I don't know what, she's gone by so many different names. I always knew her as Jessica, but a lot of people who are defending her seem to be conflating the criticism of the comic with the harassment campaign as if they are all one entity, which I don't think is fair to the people who have genuine criticism of the comic.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, a bunch of transphobes from Kiwi farms harassing someone and getting their sources of income shut down is, well, I'm a Christian moral theologian in addition to being a anarcho-communist and a union supporter online, so I would call it wicked and evil.
I would agree.
To do that. So, and also I want to say fuck corporations, you know. So, and those are sort of not the parts of what is interesting about this. Because the idea of shoplifting, I think, let me see if I can pull up exactly what I said, because I believe I said that it was trying to find the tweet that I was yeah.
I think you said rich kids LARPing as poor.
Yeah. It's an interesting topic to consider the ethics of, and it can illumine some broader matters pertaining to leftist theory and praxis. So it obviously involves a lot of questions about the nature of private property, the consequences of our actions. There's certain ethical concerns and being someone who's doing a PhD in ethics, that's what my mind immediately goes to. Questions of what is necessary for survival, and rhetoric surrounding that, rhetoric around who counts as criminal, who can get away with shoplifting versus who can't, the place of the nature of luxuries and luxury items, individual versus group action, and a whole lot of some very interesting and compelling questions and important things to think about. But the problem is it's become this whole thing, like with a capital T. It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's become this sort of reified, sort of a signifier of, shoplifting is an inherently good act because you're sticking it to the man. And if you say something bad about shoplifting in a particular context, or you say maybe it isn't always a good thing to do, then you are a not good leftist or not really anarchist. And it's like, it's what I see on display is a kind of very individualistic, and not even real, like I said, Max Stirner would call bullshit on this because these people are very deeply spooked by the ideas of this sort of sanctified idea of real leftism or real anarchy. But it's this kind of lifestylist, again, LARPing, because if you're actually poor, and shoplifting is at times a necessity, um, it's a very different situation than middle class white guy, um, being able to get away with stealing a bunch of erasers,
Or in
or
Mallory's case, a middle class white girl.
mhm,
It's
um,
it's baffling because and you saw my thread about this. I've been very open about this. When I was in public school, and even when I transferred to a special ed facility for alternative education for disabled students, I stole from almost every job I worked at,
mhm,
especially when I did unpaid internships, because I needed to eat. I needed food. I My parents
mhm,
were incredibly neglectful. I would sometimes go a day to sometimes even 3 without food. I was doing what I had to do to take care of myself. And I look at people like Sarah and Mallory who are treating stealing what are ostensibly luxuries as some sort of Robin Hood act of anti capitalism. And I'm
right. And
offended.
yeah, and the problem with that is it is, of course, entirely possible to engage in sort of illegalist praxis to do to oppose the capitalist mode of production and oppressive and exploitative businesses and individuals and structures, but that cannot be done through purely individual action. Me going into Barnes and Noble and walking out with a couple of books might be fun, or might be justified in some fashion, but it is not, striking a blow at capitalism or the state. um and Robin Hood, to pick this sort of mythic character, um is anyone who's read the stories or the ballad tradition surrounding him. um he had, it was not his actions. It's sort of weird arguing about a fictional or mythic character, but I think it's actually an interesting point. He had a whole group, that supported him. It was a group action, the merry men, right?
Yeah, he had
And
a whole fucking band of volunteers that were
right,
helping him.
collective, right, group action. You look at examples of the different, revolutions that have happened that have expropriated land, private property, and the means of production for social ownership. For example, in anarchist Catalonia and in Machiavist Ukraine, two historical examples. There are also contemporary examples in Latin America and the Middle East. Again, those were not individuals going and stealing something from a business. It was a group collective activity of of the working class, or a significant portion of the working class, going and seizing the means of production and private property and those resources for themselves and for social ownership and control. And
they were redistributionists.
right, exactly. And again, that is not something that can be done by a single individual, irrespective of the circumstances or what they're doing. And another point that I think is very important is, even if one says, okay, I am going to engage in this kind of illegalist individual taking of, I'm going to steal some space, I'm going to steal some stuff as sort of a symbolic act, as, trying to cause some harm, even though no single person could ever bring a significant financial harm to any sort of major corporation.
Especially since these corporations directly budget around the idea of losses, so
Right.
that it doesn't negatively impact them, and then just use incidents like these losses to punish their employees for existing.
Right, yeah. But even if you do, so there was a story in, I forget which album it was. I think it was Keeping Speech Free by the late great wobbly organizer, songwriter, and storyteller Utah Phillips. And he talks about a safecracker from Chicago who it's a lifelong, worked in organized crime, breaking into banks and stealing money out of safes. And he quoted him as saying, "I am committed to one proposition: taking money from a bunch of dilettantes who earned it through nepotism. Take it away from them by hook, by crook, slingshot, canoe. We must shaft these guys." And the difference between this person, who, again, criminal, worked in organized crime, and who as expressing this kind of, fuck the man, I'll take what I want, view, and imbuing it with a political kind of belief, is this safecracker actually put himself at risk of death and imprisonment in doing that, whereas most of these people, most of the sort of petty bourgeois, middle class, cis white people, the most they're risking is like what, a fine. Maybe they're taken to, maybe loss prevention takes them into a back room for an hour until they give whatever they stole back, whereas they're not actually, risking anything. And by enjoining this kind of activity for people that are part of marginalized communities, for people of color, for queer people, for unhoused populations who do need to shoplift, to steal, to survive, oftentimes, to engage in other kinds of illegal activity in order to survive, they are at much greater risk to their freedom and their physical and material health and well-being, than again, a sort of a white dilettante who's, again, which is why I say they're LARPing at being poor. They're not actually taking a risk to steal something that they need to survive. They are engaging in a sort of fun, adrenaline charged, risky activity that makes them feel like they've done something when they aren't actually undertaking any significant risk, and are in fact putting other people's welfare at risk. Now, I know it's not universal in every business every corporation, but and it has, and like if I were just an employee, I wouldn't care. Like if anybody stole from, especially if I'm working for like Walmart or Target or any of these places, but there are managers, there are bosses who will take it out on you, whether it's official policy or not. And honestly, there's no way of knowing what the structure or what the personality or attitudes of management is at any particular store you happen to be stealing from. And you don't know what the effects of that are going to be on the employees. Maybe you have some sort of anecdotal evidence from your own experience or those of your friends, but unless you actually know, like this employee who was on the clock when you stole, that hoodie full of makeup or whatever, um, maybe they were already in a tenuous position at that job, and the manager is a real asshole who is going to use this as an excuse to fire them. Or maybe that's not the case and the manager is a cool dude and is just like, yeah, whatever, it happens. But the point is, you'd have no idea of knowing, and it is irresponsible to put someone's welfare at risk in order to make yourself feel good because you stuck it to the powers that be.
And many times, they won't directly fire employees for this. Instead, they'll start docking their pay, reducing their hours, and trying to bully them into quitting. Similar to
Oh yeah,
what a lot of homophobic employers do to gay, bi, queer, and trans employees. Like,
yeah, and without any sort of organization at work, without any sort of strong union power, you have no way to fight back against that.
exactly.
And as
Which is
anybody who
why
has
right
tried
to
to,
work states just don't. They
right,
fuck people over even more.
right, and as anybody who has tried to start a union, who has tried to organize at work knows, I mean, yes, technically it is illegal for the boss in the United States anyway to fire you for trying to start a union. They will still fire you because you're trying to start a union, but the reasons will be one of a billion other things they can fire you for. And again, depending on state laws, these sort of quote unquote right to work states, it's very easy to just fire someone basically just because. You can always, if you want to fire someone, you can always find a reason to justify doing that. And even if you don't want to actually fire them, like you said, there's a ton of things you can do as a boss, as a manager, to make things just ever more miserable, ever more not worth staying on the job, in order to get somebody to quit. That's happened to me. It's happened to people in my family, happened to friends. Yeah, it's,
Everyone's had a shitty boss who treated them like garbage at least once.
yeah. And like, if you really want to do something to help workers and to push back against capitalism, and to actually do something to fight back against, again, the capitalist mode of production, then fucking join the industrial workers of the world and start a union. you know
Join a fucking union. Like
yeah.
it
And
costs like the same price as a Chipotle burrito a month. It's so
yeah,
fucking affordable.
and
If you can afford
and
to
and
join a
at least
union,
right
join a union.
now dues are suspended because of the COVID virus. You can join for free.
Yeah, no, the artists union that I'm a member of suspended their fucking dues literally until the end of May.
hmm And if you're having trouble finding, and I understand, with, especially in this economy and with the quarantine, it's hard to come up with the money. If you're giving any money on Patreon to bread tubers, cancel that shit right away. And wow, now you have money to pay your IWW due.
Like, especially folks like fucking ContraPoints or Philosophy Tube, like, cancel your
Or
pledges for
American
shitty
Johnson.
performative leftists. And I mean performative in the colloquial sense, not
Yeah.
not the actual moral philosophy term.
It Okay. I promised myself I will not go down a rabbit hole explaining what performative means.
No, it's okay.
uh,
That's why I clarified I'm using the colloquial term for performative.
yeah. No,
Because
it's
I know that
it's
like
just
I
it's
know the academic
lifestyleism.
in you is
It's
getting an
virtue
urge right
signaling.
now.
Yeah, no, it's like it's I mean, honestly, it's basically it's virtue signaling in a sense. It's not a great term, but I think it gets the point across. You know, it's. I also have to wonder how many of these people actually have shoplifted.
That's what I
Um,
was saying to Honey Spam last night. Honey Spam is a friend of mine who's also been very vocal on this subject. Um, she's been working retail for years, so she's seen a lot of this stuff that people are talking about hypothetically happen in real life, and has seen the consequences face first. And it's a really good discussion to have with people who have actually worked in retail and people who actually have shoplifted. And the only thing that I can come up with as an explanation is because they've never shoplifted out of necessity, they don't understand how shameful it can make those of us who have done it
mhm.
feel. They've never experienced the desperation of needing to steal to eat and the shame of knowing that you took something. It's not this heroic badge of honor. It's this,
Right,
oh god, I'm such a dick. I really fucked that cashier over by stealing this. It's this feeling of discomfort. It's not
right,
a fun
because
fucking experience. It really
right,
isn't. Because if you were actually
because
stealing because you needed it, you'd know that.
yeah, and you feel that sense of guilt or shame because you have empathy. You know, you realize that what you're doing, maybe you need to do it, but it's going to have a negative. It may very well have a negative effect on another human being, a fellow worker, and that sense of solidarity, of empathy, of concern for the other person, um, causes you to say, yes, I need to do this, but I also feel bad about it. And what is missing in a lot of these sort of very cavalier approaches, saying, yes, go shoplift whatever you want, is there is no real sense, at least that I can discern, of empathy with or solidarity with your fellow workers that are, or even with your fellow human beings that are going to be impacted by your actions. You know, your actions, our actions, do not take place in a vacuum. And part of the ethical tradition that I work within, called virtue ethics, places a very high premium on the kind of character that we are developing through our actions, through our practices. And if you are the kind of character that you are cultivating, the kind of person you're turning yourself into by saying, you know, fuck the man, fuck the workers, I'm just going to take whatever I want, and I don't care what the impact is, because probably it's not going to be bad for the workers. I mean, I don't know. It's like I would have to say, what kind of person what kind of character does that evidence? You know, what kind of person are you making yourself by doing that? And I think that what you're turning yourself into by engaging in those kind of practices, the kind of personality you are demonstrating by advocating for this or by even doing it, is someone who is egotistic, not egoist. I actually have a lot of love and respect for the egoist tradition from Stirner and Tucker and others, but someone who is, um, fuck you, got mine.
Yeah.
And that is a attitude, that is a kind of moral character that is completely incommensurate with real anarchist and real leftist values and action and theory.
Now, none of this is to say that either of us agree with the harassment that Mallory and Sarah and the other people in her circle have been dealing with,
Absolutely.
because That's straight up deplorable behavior.
Yeah, that's fucked
There
up
is
shit.
no excuse for misgendering either of them. There is no excuse for harassment or death threats or any of the other shit that's been going on. That's not acceptable, and I will never endorse harassment of someone I'm critical of. I didn't endorse harassment of ContraPoints. I didn't endorse harassment of Ollie. I didn't endorse harassment of Lindsay fucking Ellis, even though I'm very openly critical of her to the point where she blocked me. I don't give a shit
Hmm.
how much of a dick these bread tubers and like leftist larpers claim. Like, they all tend to behave very shitty lately, but I don't care how bad it gets. If they're not harassing you, don't harass them, is where I'm coming from. Like, don't start a drama war with someone you don't even know. It's stupid, it's petty, and misgendering anyone intentionally to harm them is the kind of shit that'll get you blocked by me. I will never endorse intentional misgendering against people.
Yeah, it's again, like I said at the beginning, it's evil. It accomplishes nothing of value if you believe in working class solidarity and opposing capitalism and the state. It's in fact counterproductive to that. It's a kind of thing that evinces a personality marked by cruelty uh, rather than compassion. And as it's cliche, but it's like my mama said, no, growing up, two wrongs don't make a right.
Exactly.
And the people who are harassing these individuals, they should be ashamed of themselves. They should stop. And I think action to stop them, to remove their ability to continue that harassment, I think is perfectly justified. And I think being wrong, having a bad opinion, is never justification for harassment.
It's kind of depressing to me how easily groups like Something Awful and 4chan and the farms will take over leftist discussions and important conversations that we need to have about stuff like this and use them as an opportunity to harass people. And we tend to just overlook it because we know that the people we're criticizing will conflate our criticism with that harassment, so we don't see them as worth defending, which is really sad and kind of
Hmm.
pathetic that we're not willing to defend people we disagree with just because we think they're dicks.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is the nature of online. Part of it is just being online, but also what online leftism, I'm not going to say has become, but sort of what it always has been, of this sort of sectarian, internecine sniping at each other and generating drama, um, in order to prove that I'm right and they're wrong. And especially with the rise of BreadTube, which came out of, really has its roots in stuff like That Guy with the Glasses and Nostalgia Critic, um, using this kind of drama in order to, again, generate ad clicks, get subscriptions, get more patrons, and make money, basically. I think really I think that there's, like as we were talking about, there's some very significant and important things to think about with this, and to talk about, and to engage in the contradictions and the dialectic, if you want to be more Maoist about it. But
Get as
I
Maoist
think
as you want. This is a podcast for deep personal and philosophical discussion. I want you to
yeah.
get weird with it. You know what I mean?
But I think ultimately the best thing we can do is to take this offline, in many respects, um, because part of it is just the structure of how the social media platforms work. It's designed to make money off of us by,
Fostering
again,
these arguments.
yeah. And again, to repeat what I said before, uh, log off, have whatever opinions you want. If you want to, advocate for shoplifting and stuff all you want, I give you permission to do that if you log off and join a union and actually organize with the working class. Because getting into arguments online, as fun as that may be, as much dopamine as that may give you, and Lord knows we need a lot of dopamine right now, you are going to actually accomplish something for the values you claim to hold if you do nothing more than, again, just turn on automatic sub minimum dues for like $6 a month for the industrial workers of the world. You don't even have to go to meetings. You don't have to actually show up and organize. I would like it if you did, but you would do more for the self-emancipation of the working class by doing that than by getting into these pointless arguments on Twitter, and joining in with harassment and stuff like that. It's if you are a leftist, if you're an anarchist, if you claim uh, to hew to those values, um, and you aren't putting your time and effort and money into the self-emancipation of workers, then it's you're just doing it because it's a cool label to put on yourself, to be blunt.
Yeah.
And we don't need you in organizing with us. Well, you're not organizing. We don't need you with sharing this label just because you think it's cool. Put up or shut up, bluntly.
Like, I'm not able to do a lot
You,
of organizing myself because I'm mostly homebound. I
mhm.
have a lot of trouble getting around because of chronic pain and several physical disabilities that limit me. Um, but every time I go out grocery shopping, I go out to the dispensary to pick up meds, I go literally anywhere in this town. I put these stickers that I printed that are promotion for the Artists Union, the IWW, um, basically any union. And I
Mhm.
will just hide them all over the city for people to find.
Yeah,
I literally vandalize public property in order to promote unionization because
yeah.
there's not a lot I can do,
A
but
gay do
that's something
crime.
I can do as an artist is I can promote the union through artistic rebellion.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff that pretty much all of us can actually do something. And if you're listening to this, I'm assuming you value that in some fashion. Um, but yeah, and even again, I'm an academic. I'm disabled. Um, I am trying to organize in my school, in my workplace. But yeah, there's tons of stuff that we can do, and there's tons of groups. And like on my stream, um, at the top and at the end of it, I always mention, go join these orgs, make contact with them, and there's national groups, there's local groups. Um, Again, I always will promote the IWW, but there's, the Socialist Rifle Association and John Brown Gun Club. They're doing a lot of mutual aid work right now. There's Food Not Bombs. There's the incarcerated workers groups that the IWW does.
There are several sex worker advocate groups that function
Yes.
similarly to unions but cannot legally be unions due to the heavily regulated and sometimes even
Yeah.
criminalized nature of sex work.
Yeah. SWAP. The Black Rose Anarchist Federation, which has been heavily involved in the student strikes and in the universities in California. Um, and again, in whatever city you find yourself in, I can pretty much guarantee you that there is someone doing some sort of work that could use your help in some fashion, whether it's, just talking with them on the phone, being another person, obviously contributing money if you can do that, or time. You can do stuff online. Again, if you have graphic skills, graphic design skills, or if you're an artist, you can design agitprop. Like I said, you can the local IWW branch that I'm at did a phone zap where we all called in to a company that was mistreating its workers under the current. They were refusing necessary things, hazard pay, overtime, and such. And so we organized massive phone calls to the store to complain about that and advocate for the workers. You know, and you can do that from the other side of the country if you get keyed in to that. So again, there's tons of stuff there's tons of work to go around, and I want to say something that Pete Seeger said. He in one of his live albums. I'm trying to find the exact quote. One of his live albums, he starts singing "We Shall Overcome," and he prefaces it by saying, "This is live at Carnegie Hall, 1960. If you want to get out of a pessimistic mood yourself, I've got one sure remedy for you. Go help those people in Birmingham or Mississippi. There's lots of work to be done. And we need everybody. Again, if you believe, if you're a leftist, if you're an anarchist and you believe in this, all I'm asking you is to put your money where your mouth is, literally and metaphorically. And I will say, from my experience, I've got chronic depression, I've got suicidal ideation. When I am actually involved in doing something, whatever it is, even if it's just phoning in to our local branch business meeting, I'm connecting with others. I'm connecting with people that share my values. I am contributing to building the kind of world I want to live in. That I want my family, my nieces and nephews, and I don't have any children, but the children I might have, that I want them to live in. And yes, it's a very difficult time. There's a lot of pessimism, a lot of very justified sort of despair or despondency over the current political situation, but the answer for it is to try to bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old. And if you go do that, if you do anything, I could damn near guarantee you that you'll feel a little bit better about the
We are
world
living in
after
a
that.
time of change, a time of revolution,
Mm-hmm.
both social, economic, and even political, and maybe even literal revolution if things continue to go the way they are. And I would rather it be a revolution of dreamers who are willing to put their money where their mouth is than for it to be a Les Mis, a decadent failure. I don't want that to be our. I don't want our future to be a decadent failure. I want it to be a concrete fact. I want it to be a success. I want us to be able to work together to make this world better, because I mentor a lot of kids that I have seen struggling due to economic failing, due to abuse at the hands of their parents, due to discrimination by the public. And if organizing direct action is the only means we have of giving these kids a chance at a better future than the one I've got, then
Mm-hmm.
I will take it.
Yeah. And honestly, direct action is the only thing that's ever accomplished anything.
And
Argue.
direct action doesn't have to be violent.
Oh yeah, yeah,
It can be,
absolutely.
but it doesn't have to be. There is a place for pacifists in the revolution. Don't let
Yeah, I
techies tell
mean,
you otherwise.
yeah, I'm not a pacifist myself, at least not a doctrinaire pacifist, but I think generally speaking, I personally do believe that nonviolent action is, which doesn't necessarily mean um, legal action, but nonviolent action oftentimes is more successful. Certainly, it's better in getting people on your side. And I mean, there's a whole conversation to be had about violence, nonviolence, and sort of the rhetoric of power around that. I don't mean the sort of bourgeois liberal nonviolence that for
The way I've
example,
always
Martin.
put it is I'd rather build a table than a guillotine, but I will buy the iron if I have to.
Yeah, yeah, and remember, Gandhi and Dr. King were seen by the status quo, by the liberals of the day, by the powers, by the ruling classes of the day, as violent. You can look at political cartoons from the early '60s in the South depicting Dr. King, and he is always depicted as a violent person. Even though he practiced non-resistance and non-violence, non-violent non-cooperation. So don't be deceived by the bourgeois liberal co-option of the rhetoric of nonviolence. Nonviolence takes a lot, like actual nonviolent revolutionary change can be very effective and takes a lot of moral fortitude and courage to do.
I don't disagree.
But yeah, all of which is to say, stealing a bunch of candy bars because you want to stick it to the man does not accomplish anything besides giving you an adrenaline rush and possibly endangering your fellow workers. Practice solidarity.
I
Please.
remember Mallory at one point in her thread comparing this to having a protagonist in your comic that commits piracy. She straight up compared this to piracy. And my only response to that is piracy creates more of a resource, not taking it. Like it's duplication, not theft. And the idea that you could compare stealing erasers, sketchbook, and Copic markers to pirating movies and video games is very frustrating to me and very stupid. Because
it's a very different physical action or activity, and it has very different effects on you and the world around you and the people involved.
Piracy doesn't negatively affect the actors or the staff or the crew or the makeup artists or the directors of the films that you pirate. They already got paid.
Yeah,
they're gonna keep
I'm
their
pretty
job.
open
They're not gonna
about
get
seeing
fired because you pirated a copy of, I don't know, Fast and the Furious 7 or something.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm pretty open about not really seeing piracy almost as a moral imperative at times. But yeah, no, it's very different. It's a very different. That is not a good comparison.
And the
For
comparison
all
of
the
the
reasons
main character to
we just
Robin
outlined.
Hood also is not a very good comparison. Like, I'm
Yeah,
genuinely frustrated by these people. Someone compared
Robin Hood, again, the point is stealing from the rich to give to the poor. You're not stealing those art supplies to give them to, the local boys and girls club. You're stealing those art supplies. Again, I don't follow the comics, so I don't know if this is part of a longer storyline or
it's
something like
not.
that.
This
But I'm
is a
just
one
guessing.
time. This is a one-time character.
Yeah. So it's like, again, if you are doing a Robin Hood, you're stealing a bunch of stuff to give it to those that need it, and putting yourself at risk instead of them. Then again, that's a very different conversation. It's a very different kind of action.
And I also saw someone compare this to the movie Office Space. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, I actually watched it for the first time a few months ago.
So you're
Awesome
familiar with
movie.
the whole destroying an organization from within vibes of it.
Right, yeah.
That's the kind of theft that I actively promote. Like, no one
Yeah.
is going to say that those people are inherently bad for defrauding a billionaire because it's a fucking billionaire. Defraud them all you want.
Right, yeah.
I don't give a shit. Like, steal from the rich, literally.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, you're not criticizing these people even though they destroyed a massive conglomerate. And I'm like, yeah, because they destroyed a conglomerate, not the life of some
Yes.
worker at the fucking Michael's craft store.
Yeah, yeah. Organize with your fellow workers to expropriate the means of production. Please.
Like,
I urge you.
Like, and even if you can't organize, become some billionaire sugar baby and redistribute their wealth to sex workers and unemployed parents.
Mhm.
Fucking burglarize an oil tycoon's households. Like, if
Burn
you
down
are
a mansion.
stealing to help people and redistribute those resources, then do it. But if you're shoplifting for your own selfish agenda, don't pretend that you're doing something good, some big anti-capitalist shit. You're not. You're stealing Copic markers and erasers because you have art block. It's
Mhm.
stealing luxuries does nothing to help anyone but yourself. Doing selfish acts and proclaiming them as some sort of revolutionary act is the most arrogant bullshit I could possibly imagine. That's
Yeah,
like donating to a charity that you already own.
it's the moral equivalent of wearing a Che Guevara shirt and going to class high.
Exactly. And that's coming from someone who generally likes a lot of Che Guevara's policies. I genuinely I know he was a homophobe. I'm critical of him on that. He was a douche.
Mhm.
But he had good economic policy, and that's something that I like discussing. But like going to fucking school high wearing a printed Che Guevara Obey t-shirt it's not gonna persuade your classmates to unionize, start a student union, and fight the dean in a fucking ring under the school in order to make tuition free. It's not gonna change jack shit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's honestly it's the same sort of level of self-understanding and political understanding that I saw in high school from kids that wanted to be edgy and just bored rich kids,
Yeah, this has the
and
Tumblr shoplifting fandom kind of vibes to it, in my opinion.
no idea what you're talking about, but I'll take your word for it.
There was a
I'm an
community
old.
on Tumblr for about 5 or 6 years that did competitive shoplifting, and they would show each other their hauls and see who could steal the most amount of valuable items. And I'm talking Gucci bags, designer shoes, high value items that
Mhm.
cost a lot of money for people to purchase despite being very cheap to produce.
Mhm.
Genuinely expensive bullshit. Someone in the comments says, Jessica said that this comic wasn't meant to glorify nor condemn shoplifting. It was just a thing that happened. That's not a good excuse. It really isn't.
It's. I mean, even so, the conversation surrounding this, surrounding the comic has gone beyond the bounds of what the author uh, may have wanted or intended.
This is a situation of impact is more important than intent, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't care that
And
she didn't want to glorify it. She did. Even if it
yeah,
wasn't her intent, that's what her
yeah,
comic did.
and ultimately for me, what the stuff that's interesting about this has very little, if anything, to do with the comic as such, or even the author. It's again, we're talking about the place. Like I said, it's these questions about individual action versus collective action, the sort of the ethical aspects of leftist praxis that I think are far more interesting than um, analyzing a comic or a bad take that someone had online.
Like, this isn't about her having a problematic protagonist in the comic. I have
Mm-hmm.
plenty of
Right,
problematic
exactly.
protagonists. I'm working a video game where the main protagonist is a drug addict. That's pretty problematic if you ask me. This
Mm-hmm.
isn't about how problematic the character is. It's that these actions are being portrayed by Jessica's fans as inherently revolutionary when they're
Mm-hmm.
not.
Yeah, it's not an inherently shoplifting in and of itself is not an inherently revolution. It's just it's a thing that people do, and it has the potential to be revolutionary. I suppose, and under certain circumstances. Um, Again, if you are, organizing, you know, a massive, again, I don't want to sort of go down the rabbit trail of hypotheticals and counterfactuals, but like if someone said, hey, we're an illegalist anarchist group, we're organizing a raid on, the local Target, or something to get like all the food and healthcare supplies, and then we're going to go distribute them to the, to the uh, to the poor. It's like, yeah, sure. If you understand the risks and you're willing to do that, then fine. That would be, in some sense, a revolutionary action. But again, just one individual stealing some stuff that they want is not. It's just someone stealing some stuff that they want, and that's not revolutionary. Sorry. And if you just want to say, I would have very little, if any, problem if someone actually was honest about it and said, hey, look, I want all this shit, I don't want to pay for it, I'm just going to steal it. uh that is a I think that there's that's a problematic stance to take. I don't think it's a good thing to do, but at least you're being, I would give you the respect of being honest about your desires and intentions with that. But
Like,
to say, I'm gonna, yeah, to say, no, I am a revolutionary, I am the vanguard of the proletariat by uh stealing this $15 leather bound edition from Barnes and Noble, is you're not. I'm sorry. Again, it's like, yeah, I'm sorry. If you want to be revolutionary, here's you can go back and listen to the list of groups to join. It's not particularly fun or glamorous work. A lot of it is just dealing with people, but it's stuff that needs to be done. And you want to be a revolutionary, go do it. And I think that's part of it. Is there's this, and again, it's something I totally understand, but there's this desire to have the revolution tomorrow, and for it to be a glorious, glamorous thing with lots of red flags and barricades uh, and all that. And frankly, it doesn't work that way. It's very boring, hard work most of the time.
yeah, revolution isn't fun. It's not a party. This isn't a musical. This
Yeah,
isn't a movie. This isn't
yeah,
fucking The Girl on Fire. This isn't Hunger Games. Like,
yeah,
there's work
and
to be done. There's organizing, communication, negotiations. There's shit that you actually have to do if you want change. You can't just stand
there's
in front
fucking
of a
there's
crowd and say,
spreadsheets.
change! Yeah, there's fucking spreadsheets. There's fucking forms you gotta fill out.
Yeah, it's like to want to organize a union. It's like one of the first steps is getting a contact list together. uh, I have a spreadsheet of the place where I'm organizing. It has like names and phone numbers and like comments. It's like I had a conversation with this person, so many days ago, and on a scale of 1 to 5 with how on board they would be with the union, I would put them at a 4. This person has these resources, and then we have to all of us that are on the organizing committee have to get together, every week or every couple of weeks, and say, and update things on progress, and it's like, and our projection for when this might actually, like when we might have like an election or something like that, is like a year and a half or 2 years now with the COVID stuff. And it's like, yeah, you can't post your way to revolution. You can't have good opinions to revolution.
Revolution is
It,
action, not theory. It's
yeah,
praxis. You can
yeah,
theory all you want, but praxis is the only way to a better future.
yeah. And to the one of the examples I talked about earlier, Catalonia, the CNTFAI had prepared for the revolution for like 50, 60, 70 years. They were deeply embedded in the communities. They had spent literal decades, laying the groundwork for the attempt at revolution in 1936. And it bore an enormous amount of fruit because they had put in and continued to put in the hard work of trying to establish and continue to defend and maintain the social and economic revolution they started. It ended up failing largely due to a lot of outside influences that they weren't able to fully combat, being betrayed by the Stalinists, among other things. But and it's the same was true in Ukraine, in the Russian Revolution, um, in with the Zapatistas as well, with the Kurds in Rojava, in northeast Syria. And when you look at attempts at a sort of purely spontaneous revolution or general strike, like what happened, like the German Revolution in 1918, it failed because they didn't have the support of the people. They hadn't put in the work of actually being established and organized. It was just a spontaneous action, and it led to massive repression, and it failed. Which is what people like Rosa Luxemburg pointed out at the time. Now, obviously, they supported it, and I would support any sort of spontaneous working class action. But in order for that to actually lead to revolutionary change, we have to be prepared for that. We have to be prepared to join into it. We need the people on our side, or we need to be on the side of the people. I'm not a vanguard, but it takes work, and again, it's not glorious, it's not glamorous. It just you know it's hard work, and I think a lot of people just do not want to do that. They want the Les Miserables experience.
Yeah, they want a glorious revolution at the grave of their hero. I
Mm-hmm.
fully believe that if Bernie Sanders dies, there are going to be some relatively ignorant liberals trying to start the revolution at his tomb.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like people are treating Bernie like Lamarck.
Yeah, and he's not. He's a to be blunt, and regardless of what his personal beliefs on the matter are, he may personally be a socialist, or communist, I don't know. But in terms of the actual policies he's putting forward, it's a very sort of even center right, New Deal FDR style social democracy.
And I mean that's better
The
than what we
campaign,
have, but it's
yeah,
not what we
which believe
need.
me, I would love that. That would be way better than fascism or neoliberal technocracy. Um, but you know, and hey, the Sanders campaigns in 2016 and 2020 got people aware of the left and leftist action, and that is good mostly. I think it also means we've got a bunch of shit libs, and it's been a mixed blessing. But the movement, and if you're a person that got into the left because of Bernie Sanders, like, welcome. Um,
We're
roll up your
happy to have you,
sleeves,
but
please.
please educate
Yeah.
yourself.
And if you're white, and particularly if you're a cishet white person, um, A lot of what you need to do is basically sit down and shut up.
Like, genuinely listen to minority groups, listen to the
Yeah,
disabled, listen to
yeah,
people of color, listen to...
and and stop creeping on trans women and sex workers.
Please, we're just people.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to sell my feet pics in peace, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, oh God, I've been to. There's a reason I don't go to DSA meetings anymore.
Same. Well,
bunch
thank
of
you.
fucking white alienated man children show up and talk over the people of color and trans people that have been organizing since before they were born. Don't be that guy.
I think queerness and, like, the LGBTQ community as a whole has been heavily commodified for cishet consumption.
Oh yeah, totally.
But that's a discussion for an
I wrote a
entirely other
paper about that.
podcast.
I wrote a paper about that with regards to polyamory a year ago.
I'd love to read it.
I'm working on an updated version. I'll send it to you when I'm done.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
It's been awesome
But yeah,
having you on the pod.
if you want to call yourself, you know, I do not believe in policing identities at all. However, if I would make a recommendation, let's put it that way, if you are exploring your sexuality and you're you know, again, a cis guy, and you want to participate in queerness and you're starting to think of yourself as bisexual, go kiss a guy.
Just
You
suck
know,
a dick. Just suck
yeah,
one dick.
please. That's yeah. So yeah. See if you like it. Maybe you do, maybe you don't.
It doesn't have to be a dude's dick. It could be a girl dick. Just suck.
Yeah,
Explore yourself.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've met. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on that, but like I've met some guys that like to that seem to be calling themselves bi or queer because it's cool, which is something I just don't understand at all.
I haven't really seen that, but
I've met a couple.
everyone has their own experiences.
Yeah, sorry, I did not mean to go down that route, but
No, it's fine, dude. Or
yeah.
fam. I'm happy to have you come on any other time if you want to have more in-depth discussions about those things. But it is about time for us to wrap up. Thank you for coming on the show. It has been awesome having you, and you are always welcome back.
Excellent. Yeah, and if anybody's interested in hearing, I don't really give much of my. Actually, I don't give any of my own analysis. But I'm sure you'll put up the links to the. There's the. I'm locked out of the Twitter account for some reason. I'm trying to get that sorted, but Twitter support hasn't been helping me with that. There's a Twitter link, and then I'm also on Twitch and YouTube. I stream late at night.
Yeah, the final version of this will be uploaded to YouTube later today, and in the description I will make sure to have all of your details so that people can follow your content and take a look at your stuff, because...
Yep, I read leftist theory mostly from the anarchist or libertarian socialist tradition. I also read radical queer and liberation theology. I'm currently doing a week-long series on the death and resurrection of Christ from liberation and queer perspectives, which, if you're not Christian, probably isn't going to be very interesting to you, but you can check out the other videos. I just got started, and I do not have a Patreon at all. I do have a coffee set up, but you are strictly forbidden from giving me any money until you sign up as a dues-paying member of a union.
Do not donate anything to, like, artists or content creators or anything on the left until you have joined a union. Join a union. Yeah. Join a fucking union. Just join a union. Just join a union.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
This entire video has been union propaganda the entire time.
Yeah. I will permit you to give money to sex workers because they are braver than the troops.
Pay for your porn. Pay for your fucking porn, please.
Yeah, seriously. All right. Well, good talking with you.
It's awesome to have
It's
you
been
on the
enjoyable.
show. Let's call time of death. 3, 2.